So tell me, what's the next movie I'm going to review in this series?
Those were up, and they did.
We're smarts, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the second installment of a review series I'm currently doing for the month of July. And this is also what, to me, I think is easily one of the most underrated sequels of all time. And that film is going to be for none other than 2006's Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest, which is once again directed by Gore Verbinski. The second film of the franchise, the first of the sequels, and the second movie to be directed by Gore Verbinski. So, what is the plot of this? Well, once again we're plunged into the world of sword fights and savvy pirates. Captain Jack Sparrow is back and he's reminded that he owes a debt to Davy Jones, who captains the Flying Dutchman, a ghostly ship with a crew from hell. And facing the locker, Jack must find the heart of Davy Jones. But to save himself, he must get the help of quick-witted Will-Turner Elizabeth Swann. And if that's not complicated enough, Will and Elizabeth had already been sentenced to hang unless Will can get Cutler back at Jack's compass. And Will is soon forced to join another crazy adventure with Jack. Yeah. So how was this made? Well, after Curse of the Black Pearl became a surprise success, the cast and crew signed on for 2 more sequels to be shot back-to-back. A practical decision on Disney's part to allow more time with the same cast and crew. Writer Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio decided not to make the sequels new adventures featuring the same characters as with Indiana Jones and James Bond, but to retroactively turn Curse of the Black Pearl into the first of a trilogy. They wanted to explore the reality of what would likely happen after Will and Elizabeth embraced at the end of the first film, and initially considered the Fountain of Youth as the plot device. They settled on introducing Davy Jones, the Dutchman, and the Kraken. They even introduced the historical East India Trading Company, who for them represented as counterpoint for the themes of personal freedom represented by pirates. Planning then began in June 2004, and production was much larger than Curse of the Black Pearl, which was only shot on location in St. Vincent. That time, the sequels would require fully working ships, a working Black Pearl built over the body of an oil tanker in Bayou Lebar, Alabama, and by November, the script was still unfinished, but as the writers did not want director Gore Verbinski and producer Jerry Bruckheimer to compromise what they had written. So Verbinski worked with James Burkett to storyboard major sequences without the need of a script, while Elliott Rossio wrote a preparatory script for the crew to use before they finished the script they were happy with. By January 2005, with rising costs and no script, these executives threatened to cancel the film, but they changed their minds. The writers would accompany the crew on location, and feeling that the lateness of their rewrites would improve the spontaneity of the cast performances. So once it began time to film the movie, principal photography then began on February 28, 2005 in Palos Verdes, beginning with Elizabeth's ruined wedding day, and for Cutler Beckett's introduction, Rosie and Elliot had him arrive on shore in a boat while sitting on a horse strained in the boat. The duo originally had planned to use this introduction for Don Raphael Monaretto in another swashbuckle film the trio had wrote in the 90s called The Mask of Zorro, but the scene was cut for being deemed too expensive, and similarly the Pirates crew wanted to cut the idea for budget reasons, because they felt it would be unbelievable, or as the film's historian dismissed, suicidal. But Verbinski promised Rossio and Elliott to use the idea, and the scene was filmed one day after weeks of planning and training, and his crew spent the first shooting days at Walt Disney Studios in Los Angeles, including the interiors of the Black Pearl and the Edinburgh Trader where Elizabeth stows away on. And then they moved to St. Vincent to shoot the scenes in Port Royal at Tortuga. And sets from the previous films were reused, having survived 3 hurricanes, and the main pier had to be rebuilt as it had collapsed in November. And the crew had 4 tall ships at their disposal to populate the backgrounds, which were painted differently on each side for economy. and one of the ships used was the replica of HMS Bounty used in a 1962 film adaptation in Mutiny in the Bounty. Then on April 18, 2005, the crew began shooting at Dominica, a location Verbinski had selected as he felt it fitted the sense of remoteness he was looking for. But this was also a problem, though. The government from Dominica were completely unprepared for the scale of a Hollywood production, and a 500-star crew occupying around 90% of the roads of the island, they had trouble moving around the underdeveloped surfaces. And the weather also alternated between torrential rainstorms and hot temperatures, one of which was made worse for the cast who had to wear period clothing. At Dominica, the sequences involving Pelagasto and the fourth segment on the Battle of Isaac Curses were shot, and Verbinski prepared to use practical props for the giant wheel and bone cage sequences. And filming on that island concluded on May 2005. So after the film was shot and completed and marketed, teaser would be released before Chronicles of Narnia in December 2005, and then the film would go on to be released into the United States on July 7th, 2006. And when it came to the reactions, well, they were positive-ish, more mixed. People loved the visual effects and Johnny Depp and Bill Nighy's performances, but they hated the running time and the plot. But that did not stop the movie from breaking several records at the box office at the time, one was the opening weekend record in the United States with over $136 million, and was the fastest film to gross $1 billion worldwide at the box office in just 63 days at the time, and it became the highest grossing film in 2006. And it was the highest grossing film produced by Disney until being beaten by Toy Story 3 at the time in 2010. At the time, anyways. And the film received 4 nominations at the 79th Academy Awards. Now as for my reaction, well, screw the critics. What can I say? I've always found this movie really damn underrated, and honestly, this might just have to be the best one of the series to me. This was definitely the first of the series I saw in the theaters. In fact, actually, I didn't just see this movie in theaters. I saw this movie in theaters twice. 2 times. It was one of the first films I saw in the theater more than once. This film to me not only has the best action scenes of the series, but also the best villain of the series, and easily has a perfect cliffhanger for the third one. As a sequel, it had much to live up to the glory of the first one. Personally, I thought it did rather well. The special effects on Bill Nighy and his pirate crew was perhaps the best, very realistic too. The movie does have a bit of a slow start, but it was a wonderful film. Johnny Depp did once again very well as portrayal of Captain Jack Sparrow, as previously in the first one. This guy is Jack Sparrow. Nobody else could play Jack Sparrow better than this guy. Only Johnny Depp was born to play this role. And you can tell he really enjoys playing this character. And especially really enjoys the fans who love this character, because often at times, he'll often dress up as a character, go to children's hospitals, because he knows a lot of kids really love his character and stuff, and he knows a lot of people love his character and stuff. You tell he really enjoys doing Jack Sparrow. And Keira Knightley and Bill Nighy were also memorable performances. And truth to be told, since this movie and franchise is based off a theme ride, this is like a theme ride, but like the first one, it's like the best damn theme ride you probably would ever rode on. The action sequences and special effects were the top notch. The CGI definitely didn't bother me so much in this because it doesn't really look like CGI a lot of times. You really can't tell where Bill Nighy's extensive makeup becomes CGI tentacles. It's brilliant right there. I couldn't help but wonder couldn't really help why so many more blockbusters today can't try to do CGI like this. And it's brilliant. Stuff. And the sword fighting. Now, don't get me wrong. These are definitely one of the greatest fight scenes I've seen on film. It seems to be if someone kind of forgot to buckle their swash here, but in the spirit of second acts, this installment, much like a lot of sequels, is definitely darker in terms of ambience and character twists. The rom-soaking lurching, the sexual innuendos and sidekicks are still there. The second act still knows how to have fun, but their persistent undercutted of real treachery, both promised and delivered. The themes are darker, the tone is darker, the environment is more mysterious and suspenseful. This, in my opinion, is what makes it superior to the first film. The first film, in my opinion, was kind of more lighthearted and kid-friendly, kind of like your typical animated Disney film as if it were a live-action movie, and if it were based off a ride, and with no musical numbers. 0. This one is the opposite. It's more adult, and has a lot more mature elements, and a lot more downer moments. One of the worst things that can happen in a sequel to a successful movie is that audiences will feel like they're seeing the same movie again, just with slight variations of the theme and just less interesting. Demon's Chest gives us all the characters we love in the first movie, puts them in a refreshingly original sequel. The action sequences will keep people on the edge of their seats. And these are definitely more laugh out loud moments in this movie than a lot of comedies today. When I first saw this, I just felt entertained from the beginning right through to the end. The characters in this film are just as amazing and intricate as the first one. There are the main characters, they have each their goals, their priorities, their little quirks to go along. And the costumes and sets are amazing. Each character has an individual quality that looks authentic for their person. And the Island of the Caribbean acts as a playground for each scene, and complementing the storyline and the actors. And where do we begin this movie? We could have never picked a better spot to begin this movie, because we literally begin on the very day Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann are about to get married. It's cold and rainy, and you wonder if it's meant more to be like a funeral. But then, of course, English soldiers march through Port Royal, and it seems cliche that Turner's about to be arrested rather than married, but almost by accident. And before you get too wrapped up in the cliche, Elizabeth Swann is also arrested as well. All by one of our new villains in this film, Lord Cutler Beckett, played by Tom Hollander. And Commodore Norrington is also set to be arrested as well, but unfortunately he resigned his commission already and disappeared for reasons unknown. And this was all because our hapless love triangle aided in the escape of one Captain Jack Sparrow. And Lord Beckett is not what even he first seems, and his ambitions lie more to the East India Trading Company than to the Crown of England. And his purpose in Port Royal is simple: find Jack Sparrow, recover something he stole from the East India Trading Company before the first film even took place. So he offers to release Turner in exchange for his services in fighting Jack, and wheels turn. Before long, you literally witness the recreation of half a dozen or so gigs from the first film, and you begin to wonder where all this is even going to go. But it seems that they're just destined for a poor allusion to the Curse of Black Pearl, although a little stranger. But of course you don't just get Curse of the Black Pearl again. You get an actually different plot this time. Captain Jack and his crew are meanwhile setting sail, and this time around towards a course that's going to lead them to an all-important chest, and that only Jack knows the meaning of it. And the contents within that chest happen to tell the sad story of Davy Jones and his lost lady to sea. But in order for Jack to get the heart of things, and so to speak, he must enlist, of course, the unwilling help of both Swann and Turner. And Turner here, Will has to find Jack, get the compass so he can free Elizabeth, or Elizabeth is going to be hanged. Jack gets up unintentionally, leading both Elizabeth and Will down a path to their despair desires. And along the way, there's more mischievous antics occur, which is likely in a movie as swashbuckling fun as like a Monty Python sketch. And that's definitely not to say that there weren't on a treacherous trail of danger either. There's indeed this fair share of monstrous feats and ghastly turmoil, especially with Davy Jones's main defense and his pet, the Kraken. And as exciting as the Kraken is to watch, the fight sequences were just as eye-popping. And when you think that there couldn't be any more surprises, there's just one more in store. In the matter of someone like a magician, it's a good filmgoer never ruins the ending. Though, especially because this one is kind of, technically the first half of a story, per se, in two parts. And nothing could go wrong with a cast as energetic and enlightening as this one. When we have Johnny Depp's portrayal of a pirate who thrives on near misses, matches up perfectly with Keira Knightley's role of a thrill seeker of a girl. And even Orlando Bloom pulls his own weight in this film, filled with spectacles of great magnitude. And with the new addition of Bill Nighy, who's our new villain series I'll get to in a bit, and a bigger chunk of part of Stellan Skarsgård to bite into as Will Turner's father, who was actually a member of Jack's crew. And during the mutiny, he tried to call out Barbossa for the mutiny. He didn't like that they betrayed Jack. That did not sit well with the whole crew, so the whole crew pretty much killed Bootstrap Bill Turner. And then he pretty much joined Davy Jones's crew after he died. Right there. And I think Bootstrap Bill Turner is actually is this really interesting character. And I thought Stellan Skarsgård played him perfectly. It was definitely an outstanding experience for any filmgoer that was insured, but not everyone would obviously feel the same way. Here, if somebody obviously find it hard to take the over-the-top locations and his acting another go-around, but one man's jar of dirt is definitely another jar of gold. It which is also this funny moment where after they leave and Jack has found Davy Jones's heart, and after this epic sword fight, the Dutchman catches up to the whole boat, to the Pearl, and Jack is pretty much frolicking around with this jar of dirt. Or it's like going, I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and looks what's inside it. And apparently there was a lot of improvised moments in here, and that moment was actually one of them. And most of the actors' reactions to the scene were actually real, because they did not read this in their scripts as well. And honestly, it just works. It kind of feels out of place, but it works very well here. And also, second, the fighting action sequences are definitely more violent and intense than the first film. They're also a bit longer. The best fight of the entire movie is easily what everyone can agree with. Was Will, Jack, and the former Commodore Norrington. They're fighting on the water wheel. Not only is it just fun to watch there's also more fights going on at the same time, such as Elizabeth and the two creeps from the first movie, who are now good guys now. They've escaped prison, they've got a Bible now, they're no longer evil, and they now work for Jack. And Jack doesn't seem to really mind their presence and kind of ignores their presence. Isn't really shocked to see them, considering that they worked for Barbossa in the first film, and were arrested with the evil crew from the first film. Yeah, so yeah. The other fight was pretty much Elizabeth, Raggedy, and Pinsel. Those guys. And the entire scene is simply amazing. And the next would probably be the scene that comes after. It's where the crew of the Black Pearl are pretty much having to fight the Kraken to stay alive. This is a very tense fight and an awesome fight. I really liked it a lot. And third, the humor in this one, despite being the darkest film of the series, the humor in this one is honestly a lot funnier and there's more to it. The funniest part of the whole movie is easily during this scene where Jack and the crew are hiding on an island full of cannibals. Will reunites with them. Unites with them as well during that moment. And it's an awesome and hilarious part of the movie where they're trying to escape. And Jack versus the fruit throwing moms is also hilarious. And then him falling through every single bridge. And there's just nothing funnier than the entire scene that sequences the events that even take place. And fourth, of course, the special effects are very amazing. They were easily the best special effects of the year 2006. At the time, and of course, his effects on Davy Jones look simply stunning. They're that stunning, you aren't able to tell where the makeup stops and the effects begin. It looks really that real. The only scene where it looks a little more animated is when Jack is getting ready to go head on into the Kraken, where it's the only time. And since it's darker than the first film, there's many similarities here to Empire Strikes Back. Just as Empire Strikes Back was to A New Hope, this is the darker installment, has the least happy ending of the films. And Captain Jack Sparrow here actually has a more Han Solo type feel in this one. When it comes to comparing characters to Star Wars characters, I'd say Will Turner's more like Luke. Elizabeth Swann is not exactly Leia, but somewhat has a bit of a similar feel to Leia. Well, not fully, though. And Jack Sparrow kind of has the more Han Solo type feel. In fact, this movie, you can really tell he kind of feels similar to Han's story arc in Empire Strikes Back here, because much like Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo did not get a happy ending and pretty much got screwed over. This one, Jack Sparrow gets screwed over. And when it comes to the Raggedy and Pinsel, the comic release of this movie, they're kind of they're somewhat maybe like R2-D2 and C-3PO in a kind of a way, as they technically are the duo that's trying to spread the comedy in this trilogy, times during some of the more off moments. And once again, there's a great villain. And that, of course, villain is none other than the feared pirate himself, Davy Jones. Davy Jones is easily just one of not just the best villain of the series, but he's also one of the best villains of all time, period. He was definitely a better villain than Hector Barbossa. What made him better is that Davy Jones is a more multi-dimensional character than Barbossa. Barbosa was really just a tragic character that just wanted to live again, nothing more. Davy Jones is actually more ruthless and actually doesn't really want to regain life and kind of went. And in the third movie, you find out more about him. And you do think that Davy Jones does have a passionate side, but then the next scene, he'll definitely do something brutal and evil. So yeah, that makes Davy Jones a classic villain. And when it comes to Jack's most remembered crew members, Mr. Gibbs and Marty, they kind of get the same amount of screen time, but they get a little more. But typically, I feel like they get much more dialogue and they get much better to do in this one than the first one. That's also kind of why I like the sequel better. I feel like Jack's two most loyal crew members actually get more to do. This one, the first one, most of them are kind of just background characters, especially Marty. Like Marty only had one scene of dialogue in the first one, that was it. This one here, the crew actually feels like they actually play a more proper role this time. And he got Norrington even received somewhat of a more in-depth role, but he doesn't really appear to like the middle of the film. And then they got Orlando Bloom, who even shows a little more improvement here, and he's improved quite a bit especially since he left the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because this movie came out after the Lord of the Rings finished with Return of the King. And he's definitely improved here as his performance of Will Turner. He was great in the first one, but I feel like he even improves here. And Keira Knightley even adds a little bit more to her character here. This time she's not exactly the damsel in distress like she was in the first film. They kind of improve her character a little here. There's one thing about her in this movie I do not like. I think some of you can know what that's going to be, and that's going to be saved for later. And the new additions are also well done. Like Bootstrap Bill Turner is finally introduced, aka Will's father, and he has nice chemistry with Will during the brief scenes they have together. Another interesting character was this woman named Tia Dalma, played by Naomi Harris. She's definitely very strange and just definitely even weirder than Jack. Here, you also find out a little more about her in the third movie, which will get explained in the third film's review, but she's definitely an interesting character, and I did like the two scenes she had. And the music score for the film is great. They kept the action theme tune from the first film, but they added an extra B part to the music, which I think had been a success, and it sounds good and goes well with the A part. As I definitely recall from one scene, Jack, Swan, Norrington, the two comic reliefs, are definitely walking across this vast beach towards the camera. As zoom focuses in quickly as significant beats of the music strike. Right here. And I think the director Gore Verbinski was good at not being afraid to try something new with the music here. The script of the film is also brilliant and very funny. And lines do come up like you wouldn't really expect as well. And they're definitely hilariously unexpected that he wouldn't have mentioned many examples. Here, I don't want to mention too many scenes in this film, this review. And a few aspects of the film are comparable to Steven Spielberg's version of War of the Worlds that came out a year before this. Such as the towering tentacles rising and swirling themselves high above the ship's crew nests and snatching the odd extra and fingering them through the air now and then, and the dreaded roar of the Kraken, which is like about as big as a Sarlacc roar from Return of the Jedi. It's getting away with its teeth circling its whole mouth, and Disney really knew what they were doing there. Here, this was like back when they actually weren't afraid to actually try something and not just be over CGI and cheap like they are nowadays. The other great thing about the Kraken is that you don't really see its whole body first, and the sight from a distance enormous tentacle dragging down this helpless ship is enough to send a shiver down anybody's spine when they first see the Kraken. You have this sense of overpowering mystery is that you don't see the whole thing. We just see underwater briefly through the eyes of Will Turner as he watches the fate he brought upon an innocent merchant ship by escaping to them. And Davy Jones found out about him escaping the Dutchman because once Will reunites, they figure out the key. Jack has him sell himself to Davy Jones to call off so that he can call off Jack Sparrow's black spot, because Jack Sparrow has a black spot. The black spot is supposed to be for marked Davy Jones victims for the Kraken to find. It kind of puts him a marker for the Kraken to kill. That's what the black spot is. So after that, Sparrow gets his black spot removed, and he has to have 99 other souls given to Davy Jones so his debt can be erased. But this is kind of somewhat like keeping Jones off his track so he can get that key and get Jones's beating hearts. here, and of course they reunite with Elizabeth and Norrington, who join them on the air. And of course, Jack comes up with this lie about like how Will didn't make it because she's looking for Will here and stuff. And honestly, just Jack has the best lines in this one. Like the scene where the water wheels rolling around the island was definitely the best, and like he definitely gets more funny moments here, such as when he's escaping the cannibals, and once he boards the Black Pearl, like this is the time you almost, and the wave splashes before he can complete his speech, and Captain Jack Sparrow, or how about why is the rum always gone, which is an iconic line in this whole series. Often whenever Jack tries to drink any rum, it'll never be there. So yeah, I think it's a pretty funny line right there. And of course, the water wheel scene, easily the best here, especially when during that time Jack gets literally stuck in the water wheel as Norrington and Will Turner are dueling on it for the heart suits. Like Will wants the heart to free his dad, Norrington wants the heart so he can clear his name to Beckett, and Sparrow wants the hearts so he can call off the Kraken and pretty much gain immortality over the oceans. and during one part of this fight, Norrington's pretty much like, now if you'll excuse me, I have to kill a pirate who's ruined my life. And Turner's like, be my guest. But of course Sparrow reminds him that Turner was pretty much the reason why he didn't get to marry Elizabeth Swann, and pretty much is now in this position. And Norrington's like, unfortunately, he's right. Or when one of Davy Jones's henchmen bumps into a tree, loses his head. Over here, dummy, at the tree. And Sparrow, would you just shot it? As he steals the heart, and once he finds Davy Jones's heart, he sees the Dutchman crew, and he's like, "Oh, gotta worry about this later. Gotta go," and he just tucks it in his shirt to flee. Alright, quick. Here, and the jar of dirt line I've already mentioned. And just lots of lines he gets here. He gets way more funny moments and more epic moments in this. Especially his entrance when he shoots the crow peck in that coffin he was hiding in so he could get the key map, little key picture. Here. And I do like how this movie tragically ends and sets up their world's end. Where after all parties arrive on Isle of Curus where the chest is buried, that sword fight I mentioned breaks out between Jack, Will, and Norrington. They all want the heart for their own goals, like I've already mentioned that part. And then the chaos, Norrington secretly steals the heart from the jar that Jack hid it in, because there's this jar of sand that Tia Dalma gave him, and Jack hid it in there. But of course, Norrington opens the jar, realizes it's in the jar, and he steals the heart and runs off, pretending to lure away the Dutchman's crew. And Jones then, because Jones was not able to be on land, he cannot step on land. We find this out. He's not allowed anywhere near land. He had to stay on the ship while the crew went to persuade the gang to recover the chest before they could. Jones then shows up and attacks the Pearl with the Kraken, which kills most of the crew and destroys all but one of the Pearl's lifeboats. But Jack, who had briefly fled the battle at the time, he actually decides to return, gets his first selfless moments, decides to stop running away from Jones for good. Or no, maybe I'm exaggerating. Decides to stop running away from Jones for this moment, to aid the crew, to save the crew from the Kraken. He returns and he wounds the Kraken with a net full of gunpowder and rum. But of course they know the Kraken's not dead, they only pissed it off at this rate. So Jack orders the survivors to abandon the ship, but Elizabeth only finds out the Kraken just wants Jack and not them or the ship. Or just the ship anyways. She tricks him by kissing him and chains him to the mast so the crew can escape, but Will also caught a brief glimpse of them kissing, but Gibbs made him go into the lifeboat before he could finish seeing the rest. And then the Kraken drags Jack, who pretty much decides he no longer fears death at this rate, because he spends most of the movie trying to run away from it all. He decides he no longer fears death. He charges into its mouth with his sword. Is like, "Hello, beastie," and just charges into its mouth. Which at that time I thought he had killed the Kraken as it dragged him to the locker, since the Kraken was confirmed dead by the third one. But I was proven wrong once I saw that. Film where we find out that Beck had ordered Jones to kill it, and and the Kraken was able to get Jack to the locker without getting killed. And the Pearl also gets straight to Davy Jones' locker with it. Jones declares their debt is settled, but one of the crewmen is like, not even Jack Sparrow can best the devil. And Davy Jones is like, wait, you sure about that? Because he has them open the chest, and he discovers to his rage his heart is missing from the chest, so in some kind of way before Norrington stole the heart himself, and since Jack was the first one to find Jones's heart, he's somewhat almost kind of managed to outsmart Davy Jones in a way. And it kind of made Davy Jones think that Jones's heart got dragged to the locker himself and it'll never be recovered. But then in Port Royal, Norrington gives Beckett the heart and the letters of marque meant for Jack, and allowing him back into the Navy and allowing Beckett to gain control of Davy Jones in the seas and piracy itself. And the Pearl's crew takes shelter with Tia Dalma, where they all agree to rescue Jack. And Tia Dalma introduces the captain, who is going to guide them to our world's end to rescue Jack from the locker. You want to know who it is? The resurrected Hector Barbossa. Yes, guys, Barbossa got revived. Literally, when this came out, it apparently shocked everybody, including myself, that Barbossa was alive and he'd be back in the third movie. Like, after we saw him die in the first, it was great to see him back, and he finally gets to eat that apple he never got to have. He's like, so tell me, what's become of my ship? Eats the apple, laughs, roll credits. The perfect setup for A World's End to be continued. Now, that being said though, did this movie have nitpicks? Fine, yeah, there were still some. While the cannibal stuff, I didn't mind the cannibal stuff, it brought some more funny moments. I don't think the cannibal stuff is really needed because sometimes it kind of just got a little filler. Some parts of the cannibal stuff could have been cut out. It doesn't really have much to do with the film or plot at all. And yeah, the movie does get a bit too long at times, but I don't think it's an issue with this movie unlike actually bad movies with this kind of runtime today. The runtime doesn't feel like it overly hogs the movie like a lot of sequels today. And since this is technically the first half of a story, I don't think Will Turner gets much to do with this movie, as most of the time he's either often arrested or held captive on Davy's ship until the final act. And one thing, this was the thing I was talking about with Elizabeth earlier. One thing really bugged me here was Elizabeth at the end. This was probably my number one. You guys know how a majority of people hated Star-Lord after Infinity War? This pretty much Star-Lord after Infinity War is pretty much what a lot of people thought of Elizabeth Swann after this movie. And at the time, before At World's End, I feel like Elizabeth was ruined. Slightly in this movie. When she forcefully left Jack to die at the end. Since the Kraken was after strictly him. Like, it was... Jack clearly knew the Kraken was after him. And clearly not just the ship. And it kind of seemed like... I really don't think that needed to happen. I think, like, the movie could have just had him say that he's going to stay and just let himself be consumed by the Kraken and get the crew a chance to escape. That probably would have been better. They did not need to kind of ruin Elizabeth in that moment. She did not need to force that to happen. It just kind of made me hate the character. After this, and World's End slightly redeems her, but she doesn't really get any call out for this. No, she doesn't get any reprimanding for this. No, she kind of just gets off scot-free for this whole scenario. And I don't agree with that. Because Jack's basically dead because of her. Sorry guys, but that's kind of me being honest. She pretty much got what everyone thought of Star-Lord after Infinity War. That's pretty much what she got here. But I think that's about it for bad qualities, because regardless, I still think Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest is easily the best film of this series. And it's definitely worth the watch for those that love the first film. In the end, Dead Man's Chest is totally worth watching and buying for fans of the first that want to see a story continue and see an underrated sequel. Anyways, that's it for my review of Dead Man's Chest. If you want to know how I'm going to rate Dead Man's Chest, here's how I'm going to rate this movie. So overall, if you love the first film and want to see more of this series, then I totally recommend jumping to and buying this movie for your collection for sure. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, I'm going to give Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest a full-blown 10 out of 10. There we go. That pretty much wraps up my review for Dead Man's Chest. So our next one of this review series is going to be for what was easily should have been the final installment, or what was supposed to be the final installment that never happened. And yeah, and it's the last of the films I own, because I only own the original 3 and I plan to keep it that way. 4 or 5 I'm probably going to have to stream. But until then, guys, that will be it for this review. Thank y'all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.